The situation is dire. Stalingrad is encircled, and everything I snap up is encouraging. The Romanian divisions were unable to stop the Russians. Neither the anti-tank units nor the old Panzer 38T had been able to halt the Russians. Now we have to bring our own units forward immediately in order to stabilize the situation. But even here with us, it's not better. The Russian, probably encouraged by the circumstances at the Volga, also wants to exert more pressure here. After the combat detachment of our captain returned heavily battered, the extent of the losses really just becomes apparent. 9 tanks destroyed, 21 fallen comrades, and also Captain Rohrbeck won't be coming back. I've attempted to find out how it happened. It's being told that the lead tank had suffered several hits and was driving the assault forward regardless. Then, one shell had penetrated and injured the chief so severely that he later succumbed to his wounds. What a tragedy. To lose such a capable officer will impact the unit heavily. We now also have slowly ever less tanks at our disposal. 12 total losses in the last 10 days, and winter is coming. I believe we now have to set up proper positions here, since we will stay here until spring. A platoon leader has provisionally taken over the replacement for the fallen captain, and it seems to me that, despite his young age, he has a certain level of leadership experience. My hand is again fully functional, but what does it help me? No tank, no crew, it's all crap. One can also notice that it's going toward Christmas, and the mood due to the recent events is not good. But how are the people supposed to be cheered up? At least we've finally been issued proper winter clothing. Thick pants, padded boots. That way it's tolerable. Now, however, one can't get out of the hatches, but the tanker is resourceful. We practice slipping out through the hatch over and over again, and that way we know how to squeeze through the tight spots wearing heavy clothes. Since I currently don't have any orders, I'd like to help out with the frontline repair shop. Of course, only so long until I'm assigned to a crew again. I linger in the staff barracks and wait that I may be allowed to speak with the platoon leader. First Lieutenant Rose, who is now replacing the fallen Captain Rohrbeck, takes a brief moment and listens to my request. We start chatting and determine that we are from the same corner near Hamburg. Nevertheless, he tells me unmistakable that my place is really on the tank gunner's seat, and he asks whether I didn't want to, if the situation would permit it, go to sergeant's training course in order to be later deployed as a full-fledged commander. I shake my head and explain in a few words what back then had happened to Leonard, and that I'd gone after the collar of a certain first lieutenant. He contemplates for a while longer and states that soon this should be water under the bridge, and I should give it another attempt after winter. He would take care of it and see what he could do. Sounds not too bad for now, but I'll wait and see. In any case, I'm allowed to keep helping out in the tank repair shop for now and restore our damaged tanks there with the comrades. And there is truly a lot to do. The steel giants are always in need of something. Once it's the fuel line, another time the carburetor, the ventilation, shell damage, bow machine gun stuck in the aperture, replacing a driver's hatch, replacing commander cupola, changing track links, stripping tanks and scavenging spare parts. One can work up a good sweat that way, and at night one feels having been wrecked. Once in a while, this also means moving out with a recovery platoon to tow in tanks. Earlier, that hadn't been a big deal behind the front line. The heavy tow tractors and repair truck to the location, hook up the tank and tow it in neutral to the repair shop. Today it's almost a combat deployment. There's always an armored personal carrier for security along, and if possible another tank to guard against advances by the Russians. One day we drive out along the Lenin Canal and are supposed to take a Panzer IV short barrel in tow that suffered some transmission damage. It's already late in the afternoon and we have to hurry to get the box back before it gets dark. I'm riding along on the heavy hauler. The armored personal carrier is occupied by some infantry soldiers, and the Panther III is driving along as a security detail. Just 10 kilometers in front of the last manned outpost is where the tank is stuck. We make swift progress. Reconnaissance has reported little to non-enemy activity to us, but I also no longer believe everything they tell us. With a healthy amount of caution, one fires better. Here on the top of the tow tractor, I'm feeling totally naked. Covered in my heavy winter clothing, we're driving along the well-traveled main supply road in a light snow shower. I think we should take about an hour to get there. In the distance, I can already make out the tank, and strenuously I'm scouting the surroundings to see whether I might be able to discover anything. All seems to be quiet. When we arrive at the tank, the men are very happy that we are finally there. Out there all alone is not necessarily favorable to one's health, as the Sarge likes to say. So let's get to recovery. The repairmen check the engine and try to get it running again, but we're going ahead and moving the big tow tractor into position in order to hitch up the tank. When we are in position, I talk to the gunner and he tells me of an attempt by the Russians to take over the tank. He points to a nondescript wreck of a Russian vehicle which is lying further down in a ditch. We walk over and I can see that the shot-up car had suffered at least one hit by the 75mm tank gun. All 4 crewmen are lying scattered around the vehicle. Apparently, they had been finished off by machine gun fire. I take a closer look at the car, whether there might be anything useful, when the tank gunner starts screaming. I turn around and see that one of the presumably dead Russians has stabbed him with a knife into the calf. I pull out my pistol as fast as I can and shoot at the Russian. The 2 hits make an end of the nightmare. One bullet goes through the Russian's hand, the other penetrates through the eye and gets lodged in the head. Immediately, the head goes down to the dirt. The man is finished. I take aim at the other 3 and each gets shot into the upper body. We are not getting into any games here. One hears over and over again that Ivan will play dead and then shoot our troops in the back. In disbelief, the tank gunner looks at me and is holding his calf. I fetch the first aid kit out of my bag and bandage up the heavily bleeding wound. He thanks me, but apparently he has not yet seen many Russians close up or killed an enemy eye to eye. In the tank through the optic or at a few hundred meters with a machine gun, it's all not so bad. He also asked me what I feel in this case. Upon that, I really have to think. What does one feel when extinguish another life? The Russian also had a mother, a brother, or also children. Now he won't be going home. What does one think in that situation? I hook the injured underarm and we hobbled back to the damaged tank. After a few minutes, I tell him that one somehow becomes numb. It's not like one becoming a brute, but it's at some point an everyday occurrence to take lives. Just like one squashes a mosquito or the hunter shoots a deer. It's so easy. Or maybe not. Until now, I hadn't given it too much thought. When we are on a drive back and I have time to myself, dive into my thoughts. When the colonel had asked me for the number of my tank kills, and I told him with pride, I didn't think about the lives that I'd extinguished. It's always just the tank that are being destroyed. But of course, also the humans inside it. Here we are fighting for our people and fatherland. Does that make it more right to kill? Is the Bolshevik of lesser value? As a human being of lesser value? Or how should one put it in order to have a clear conscience? What happens when the war is over and we have won? What will happen then? Will we then all be without sin because we've only followed our orders? I try to get these thoughts out of my head and keep telling myself that we are predominantly fighting for our own survival. If Ivan wants to get our skin, we have to be quicker and better than him. Rather him than me. Nothing else counts. But the experience and my thoughts leave behind a bitter aftertaste when we are back in Mostock. The crew once again is grateful for the support, and I still help with taking the wounded tank gunner to the infirmary. It's apparently just half as bad, but he should be lying down for a few days after all. The commander still inquires whether he could call on me when the tank was back up and running again. I make it clear to him that I'd always been there when I was needed, but the Master Sergeant would have to check this with First Lieutenant Roos. Until late at night we are busy removing the engine, and at somewhere around 10 p.m. we call it quits. I do need a little bit of sleep, and it has been a long and cold day. Back in quarters, I sit together with a few comrades and we exchange the latest news from the front. Whether we now might march in the direction of Stalingrad to help out? Will we remain here and launch relief attacks so the Russian is forced to regroup? Are we abandoning Mostock and retreat further in order to free up forces? We have many opinions and ideas, but we can't change anything. The leadership will surely do the right thing. All in all, we here have hardly a real overview of the entire situation at the front. One of the comrades tells that he has now actually seen an American tank with a turret bearing a small cannon and then again an extra cannon on the side. I had heard this already several times, but I don't like that these American tanks we are now appearing over and over again. But we don't want to paint it all black, because if these are inferior, we'll deal with them too. When I'm later finally lying down to sleep, I have to keep thinking about the story with the 4 Russians. Also about my indifference to simply shooting somebody. I have changed. My mother already knew it. She already knew it, long before I did.